All of a sudden we've grown up. All of a sudden we've decided to rid ourselves of bashfulness, of that awful negative, denigrating, denying characteristic that was so much a part of our structure up until now. Canadians, at last, are discovering Canada and enjoying the experience. Canadians are relaxing. They're doing things that good old, dull, gray, middle-of-the-road Canada would have been horrified at.
Centennial year was like a party that lasted for 365 days. And I think we treated it the way we did because of our news director, Ron Laidlaw. Ron had a tremendous sense of history. And Ron knew from day one we should record this year, every day, what people did in Southwestern Ontario to celebrate Canada's history, Canada's 100th birthday. And we did exactly that. Every week we covered events somewhere in Western Ontario of some new building being opened, some project in a school, something tied in with Centennial Year.
Maybe when the firecrackers are cold and we've consumed all the cake, maybe then we should get down to the hard business of making sure that we weren't fooled by the centennial and that Canada continues to be a viable and a stronger force. Well, that's my little sermon today. I think the centennial has set the mood. The people of Canada have shown the politicians that we want a country, that we're proud of it, and we want it to grow.
That's the sound of news. That, too, is the sound of news. The way Channel 10 prepares it for 3 major presentations each weekday. News at noon, FYI, and PM. The CFPL-TV newsroom. This is the scene that goes with the sound. A busy place for more hours a day than most people are awake. It's more than just busy. The people who work here are a team, and to make each newscast, they work with systems, components, and ingredients as complicated as a surgeon's tray of instruments. An exaggeration? Have a look.
The euphoria of Centennial Year lasted into 1968. CFPL hired its first black announcer, stepped up its conversion to color broadcasting, and kicked off its fiscal year with a $2 million profit between its broadcasting and print operations. For Walter Blackburn, it was a time of growth.
With the performance of London and Western Ontario, that makes it possible for us to invest $6.5 million as our contribution to the future growth and prosperity of this community. So up the plant must go, and the sooner it's finished, the happier we'll be.
In the early 1960s, Blackburn announced plans to move his aging newspaper and radio operations to new headquarters next to CFPL-TV. But in 1964, he changed his mind and built in downtown London. He didn't want to cut himself off from his community by prompting a business exodus to the suburbs. He was one of the last men of his generation to feel that way.
What I liked about him was his sense of proportion. He said, and part of this was his family roots, but he said, look, I'm going to service London and southwestern Ontario and do it well. And he did it well.
But it was also a time of personal disappointment for Walter Blackburn. In April 1968, he was humiliated when his re-election bid to the Board of Canadian Press was defeated. 2 months later, his only son committed suicide. Marjorie Blackburn called it the ultimate tragedy in her husband's life. And then the federal government went after Walter Blackburn.
A majority of people in Canada would in fact actually have no objection to some form of press censorship by the government. And that's why I said before, and I repeat today, that here from the so-called silent majority is surely the most real threat to press freedom, not from Parliament, and most certainly not from a Senate Committee on Mass Media, but from an alarmed and frightened populace suddenly aware of a distinct challenge to its value system.
When Senator Davies' committee was set up, there was quite concern on the part of media owners that he was really going to go after the question of concentration of ownership in Canada, which was growing and had grown throughout the 1960s. And when that topic came up, Walter Blackburn was really quite fearful in a way, because he knew this committee was going to look at his particular situation in London, Ontario, where, remember now, he had the London Free Press, he had radio, and he had television.
We have no monopoly on news out in southwestern Ontario because there are many other media voices in the area.
Blackburn went on the offensive, attended most of the hearings, prepared exhaustive briefs, and met many of the committee members personally. He argued that his companies did not enjoy an information monopoly.
One other area of questioning which interested the senators, freedom of the press. This one was fielded by Channel 10's news director, Ron Laidlaw, who told the senators that enough doors aren't open to his television cameras, not even this one, to enable the telecasting of the Davie Committee, which is why we're reporting outside this door, and the London Free Press's man is in there. Jeff Scott for FYI at the Davie Committee on Parliament Hill.
On December 10, 1970, the Davie Committee released its report. CFPL Radio interrupted regular programming while the London Free Press gave the news front-page coverage.
London, Ontario is a classic monopoly situation. The Blackburn family owns the London Free Press, CFPL Radio, and CFPL-TV. On the face of it, this would constitute one of the tightest information monopolies in the country. And yet the Free Press is a very good community newspaper, and CFPL and CFPL-TV are among the best local programmers in the country. Both the radio and TV outlets are serious about local news and entertainment programming, to the point where local programs frequently draw larger audiences than do the CBC network offerings.
The report vindicated Blackburn's media empire and helped avoid what could have been an embarrassing situation for the company.
In a joint statement made this afternoon, W.T. Cruikshank of Wingham and Walter J. Blackburn of London announced the sale of CKNX Radio and CKNX Television in Wingham to the owners of CFPL Radio and Television in London.
Our purchase of CKNX brings together two long-established broadcasting organizations which have been serving Western Ontario for a good many years. As neighbors, we share the regrets of many of you at the decision of the Cruikshank family to sell their broadcasting interests.
There was concern about concentration of ownership, and they turned around and let the Blackburns buy the Wingham operation, and I think that said a great deal about them, because here was a metropolitan station, an operator, purchasing an operation more rural, but at that time helped with the survival of that station, so the Wingham residents would still have radio and television service.
And it's interesting today to think of all the commotion that was made about cross-ownership, how they've licensed and allowed all the big to get bigger, and they can own everything, and it doesn't seem to matter anymore. Complete change of thinking.
We want to guarantee, through a charter of basic human liberties, the fundamental civil rights of all Canadians.
News Now Update.
Good evening. Here's what we're